EIAM is the Federal Administration's central access and permissions system for web applications and native mobile apps. Put simply, EIAM is the Confederation's central login infrastructure. The aim is to avoid having to create a separate login procedure for each application. This centralization saves money and allows all applications to be used with the same login data. It doesn't matter how the target application is used or where. EIAM can run applications all over the world. To increase economic efficiency, the use of EIAM is governed by a so-called market model which sets out an obligation to use the system. In other words, Federal administration applications must be connected to EIAM. The market model also regulates special cases. For example, how this usage obligation applies to legacy applications, how EIAM is to be used in peripheral areas of the federal administration, and the fact that applications of the judicial authorities and affiliates are connected to the FDJP's IAM solution, the SSO portal. The FDJP's SSO portal does not feature in this video. There are various ways of connecting applications to EIAM: SAML 2.0, OAuth 2 OpenID Connect, or WS Federation. Regardless of the type of connection, EIAM informs the target application which user has logged on. This is so that the application can recognize the user. Private individuals are represented by a so-called electronic identity. EIAM obtains the electronic identities from internal and external ID providers, or IDPs. Some IDPs are administered by the Federal Administration, first for electronic identities of federal employees, and second for the e-government identities destined for private individuals outside the Federal Administration.
The e-government identity provided by the Federal Administration is called ARGOV. Cantonal applications or intermediary IAM systems of the cantons are connected directly to ARGOV. Federal applications are not.
When the external IDP universe evolves, EIAM fully solves this evolution challenge for the connected specialist applications,
acts as trust broker, and keeps the IDP universe transparent.
Even the technical identifiers come directly from EIAM and thus remain constant. These are referred to as federated identities. The quality of an electronic identity is two-dimensional. One dimension involves the size of the technical obstacles faced by an unauthorized person when logging in. For instance, the obstacles are greater if a second login factor is required in addition to the password.
And greater still if the second login factor is highly secure against forgery and eavesdropping.
Governance and business needs determine which login factors are appropriate for which application.
The FedLogin Access app for employees and the ARGOV Access app for e-government users are key elements. These access apps are cryptographically hardened and should not be confused with the much weaker authenticator apps. Smart cards provide even stronger protection for highly sensitive areas because they are not based on third-party hardware such as smartphones. Text message codes and passwords are no longer appropriate.
These factors act as proof of authorization, or credentials as they are technically known. The second electronic ID quality dimension differentiates between self-defined electronic IDs and authenticated IDs. With the latter, it must be ensured that the ID has been assigned to the right person and that their data is correctly recorded and stored. Self-defined IDs are also referred to as self-registered IDs. The e-government identity AGOV, which the Federal Administration provides to the general public, is available in both self-defined and authenticated quality. The abbreviation EIAM stands for E-Government Identity and Access Management. The term access management refers to the permissions, such as roles and attributes, that can be exercised using an electronic identity. EIAM offers the option of using flexible access management. However, the market model only defines a usage requirement for the electronic identities, whereas the access management can be lodged elsewhere, for example, in the specialist applications. EIAM's access management offers the following functions. Clients can be booked in EIAM. A client is a dedicated area of activity, also known as mandator or tenant, for instance, for an administrative unit in which rights can be assigned to existing and future specialist application users who are linked to this EIAM client. Take the following example. The Office for Outdoor Pools has an EIAM client linked to two specialist applications: water quality and visitor statistics. An administrator from the office can assign rights to pool attendant Xavier Yalondon, enabling him to use the water quality application, and can define what Xavier is allowed to do with the application. If he logs in via EIAM to the target application water quality, EIAM transmits these defined rights, that is, the roles and attributes, to the water quality application. But what does that mean when we say he logs into the target application water quality? EIAM works according to the Service Provider First or SP First principle. This requires that the specialist application is called up first. So Xavier Yalondon navigates to wasserqualität.ch. The specialist application, or an upstream policy enforcement point PEP, detects that Yalondon is not logged in and redirects him, or rather his browser, automatically to EIAM, and EIAM launches the login by means of an identity provider. The browser then automatically routes Xavier Yalondon back to the specialist application, which receives the data on him and his roles and attributes. For Yalondon, the user experience is seamless. Call up the application, log in, use the application. And if Yalondon was already logged in to other single sign-on applications, then he doesn't even need to log in to this latest application. And on the subject of PEP, with internally hosted applications, this additional protection can be used in EIAM. In this case, the filtering of non-authenticated users is then carried out by the PEP, and the data traffic is routed via the PEP's reverse proxy server. In this way, the target application is, so to speak, quarantined and is not in direct contact with the outside world.
If this RP-PEP zone protection is to be used,
the target application must accept reverse proxy. Otherwise, this is not necessary. In some network zones of the Federal Administration, the use of RP-PEP is mandatory. For externally hosted applications that are run via EIAM, an EIAM RP-PEP is never used, because zone protection is the responsibility of the external host. The animation showed how EIAM's access management can provide some or all authorization data to the target applications. But EIAM can also be used without access management. The settings Auto-Enrollment and Silent Mode, which need to be set for each target application, can be used to bypass EIAM's access management. Existing and new users are routed directly to the specialist application after they log in or register themselves without an authentication request. Rights can be administered in the specialist application, or the user can start working immediately without being assigned rights, which is quite often the preferred setup in the e-government context. However, if EIAM's access management is to be used, EIAM offers an access request procedure for first-time users or, conversely, an invitation procedure for future users. The invitation procedure allows upfront authorization of future users without the need to know their electronic identities in advance, and even without them already possessing an electronic identity. The administrator can choose whether to issue the invitation via onboarding code sent by email or another method. All of these administrative activities can be delegated internally and externally via EIAM. For example, to cantons, communes and companies. This functionality is known as delegated management and is set up in the EIAM architecture as follows. The administrator of an access client opens units. Units can represent any kind of organization: a canton, a commune, a company, a department, etc. The access client administrator adds one or more delegated managers to the units. The delegated managers can now invite and assign rights to new users. For each unit, it can be defined whether the delegated manager can themselves delegate their function to others. This website, as well as the Federal Office of Information Technology, Systems and Telecommunication (FOIT) and the Federal Chancellery, provide support on identity and access management. If you create a new application or if you need to link an application to EIAM, go to www.eIAM.admin.ch/start and open your EIAM account. This is free of charge and obligation, and an experimental mode is available. The FOIT and the Federal Chancellery will then arrange a personal advice session. If your application has extended connection needs, such as for receiving detailed user data in advance, at the time of operation or subsequently, known as provisioning, we can show you the data retrieval options during the advice session. We are also happy to answer your questions in our discussion forum at www.eiam.admin.ch/forum.